Thank you, Anand. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you our grand keynote speaker today, Daniel ODay, Chairman and CEO of Gilead Sciences. The company needs no introduction as it has saved so many lives with its innovative therapeutics for HIV and continues to do so in its fight against COVID-19 with remdesivir. Only a few days ago, the company announced that it was going to accelerate its production of remdesivir with its manufacturing partners in India and has committed to a donation of at least 450,000 vials of remdesivir. A company with a heart is led by a man with a heart and a purpose. Daniel is known for his purposeful leadership and his commitment to patient access. His bold collaboration with Merck, a competitor, to look at treatment options for HIV, is a testament to his commitment to patients. Today, he is joined by Rich Karlgaard, an entrepreneur who is now a Forbes publisher. He sold his magazine Upstart and is a prolific writer, author, and journalist. He has written several books on high-performing leadership and organizations. And if you find his face familiar, it is because he's often seen on television and on panels and on Business Forbes shows on Fox. Over to you, Rich.
Well, thank you, Anita, and kudos to TiEcon for once again producing the right conference for the right time. It's a thrill to work with TiEcon. Dan, I want to start out with something critically important in the news today. The New York Times wrote today, as this interview is being recorded on April 29th, quote, "The current wave of COVID has a different clinical behavior," a surgeon at Sir Ganga Ram Hospital in India told the New York Times. "It's affecting young adults. It's affecting families. It's a new thing altogether. 2-month-old babies are being infected. Where it stands right now, hospitals are running out of critical supplies, including oxygen." Now, I know that Gilead has really stepped up to help solve the problem and alleviate the suffering. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that and then talk about the role of remdesivir in all of your efforts.
Yeah, thanks, Rich, and really appreciate being at this conference. It's an appropriate thing to start out with. I mean, the extent of human tragedy that we all are seeing in India is extraordinary. And, the compassion that we all have for everybody in India right now is immense. Many of our employees have loved ones over there that have been affected. So first and foremost, I think we've always led with purpose-driven approach at Gilead and with compassion. And so just this week, of course, we announced that we would do everything we can to support India with remdesivir, which is a medicine, as I'll get into, that can make a big difference for severe patients that are hospitalized. And so we will lean into everything we can do. We have announced that we'll be donating at least 450,000 vials of remdesivir for India. We are working closely with our partners in India that manufacture remdesivir in India to enable them to scale up even more so. All of this is a result, frankly, of work that we began years ago. In fact, a decade ago with remdesivir. Remdesivir is not something that just materialized a year ago when the pandemic materialized. It's a decade of investment in research at Gilead. The colleagues I get to work with every day are brilliant when it comes to antivirals and emerging viruses. And because of their readiness level, we were ready with remdesivir as soon as we heard about this virus circulating in China. Began immediately with clinical trials. And one aspect of our approach, which I'm really proud of, and this is part of Gilead's pioneering history, is that immediately when we knew this medicine could help, we reached out in the developing world to our partners that are generic manufacturers and gave them royalty-free licenses, allowed them to ramp up supply for the developing world while we focused on the developed world. That happened almost now a year ago. And as a result of that, there are 7 generic manufacturers in India that we've enabled that have a royalty-free license that are producing remdesivir for India and for other countries, right now mostly for India. And so because of that, and this is, as I said, something that Gilead has a long history with. We've done this with HIV medicines more than 2 decades ago. And I think it's just part of our social responsibility. But what I would end with, Rich, on this comment is, when you see this type of human suffering, you're struck by humility. You're struck by the fact that this virus is powerful, and science is helping in so many ways, but we still have a long way to go.
Well, one almost hates to bring this up, but since you're a publicly traded company, will there be pushback from shareholders regarding your altruism about doing the license-free arrangements with all the companies in India to produce remdesivir? Or is it just the right thing is the right thing, and if we do the right thing, we'll be a stronger company going forward?
It's very much the latter. It's one of the reasons I joined Gilead. I think from the board down to everybody in our company, people join Gilead because of the incredible work we do for patients, right? I mean, how many companies, this company is only 30 years old, and thanks to my predecessors and the great colleagues within the company, they've been successful at turning HIV from a death sentence to a manageable chronic illness, curing a major hepatitis C, and making sure that all the while they pursued science, that they always put patients first. And so there was no question. I can tell you when it came to these types of decisions early in the pandemic, we donated also the entirety of our supply when we first knew the medicine worked best, March and April, which provided supply to really thousands of patients. And it was the same thing when we were approached with the tragedy in India. So it's just the right thing to do. And to your point, I think shareholders have certainly understood the roles that we've taken here and appreciate, I think, our human contract.
Well, you speak with the conviction of somebody who's been at Gilead for a long time, but in fact, you've been CEO and chairman for 2 years after a great career at Roche. What persuaded you to join Gilead as its CEO and chairman?
Yeah, 2 things. One is what I just mentioned. I mean, the level of science is extraordinary. Again, for a company this size, a large biotech company like this, to have made such an impact upon global human healthcare in such a short period of time always caught my attention from the outside. And I have to say, I haven't been disappointed since I've come in here, not only in our work, our continued leadership role in virology, and we have so much more still to do in HIV and hepatitis and our virology diseases, but we're also now, a major contributor to cancer. In fact, we just recently launched a medicine that will extend the lives of patients suffering from triple-negative breast cancer by more than double, and these very late-stage patients in a very difficult-to-treat disease, with a medicine called Trodelvy, which we also expect to work across multiple tumor types. So we are now branching out into other therapeutic areas like cancer in a very big way, like inflammatory diseases. And this is all, I think, part of Gilead's legacy, to be science-driven and to keep the bar really high for impact on patients. But the second piece of the puzzle that drew me to Gilead, and I think draws so many to Gilead as I go around and speak to all of our colleagues, it's that intrinsic motivation of the impact that we make for communities that we serve and for patients. So it's everything from what I said before, pioneering this concept of developed world, developing world, different manufacturing, royalty-free arrangements, to how we lean into health inequities. Because we are 3 out of every 4 patients around the world with HIV are on a Gilead medicine. With that comes a tremendous responsibility. So we lean into the communities we serve. We've done a tremendous amount of work around the globe. Here in the United States, I'll just give one example. We've done a lot of work now for the past decade in the South, where our communities, our underprivileged communities, and communities particularly of color, are disadvantaged in terms of their access to the healthcare system. And so we have dedicated more than $100 million over 10 years to nothing to do with the medicine, really to do with the health inequities, really working upstream to allowing access to medicine, to working on education. And all this has come to a stark reminder of our social commitment and our social responsibility, particularly over the last year with the murder of George Floyd and the racial inequities coming to a level that makes sure that corporate America cannot turn the other way. In fact, leaning in so much into what we do as a company. So those are the types of things, Rich, that inspire, not only brought me to Gilead, but inspire me every day at Gilead to work with colleagues that have that same like-mindedness.
Well, you've done a great deal just now of describing Gilead's culture. What imprint did you want to have on Gilead's culture, which is a high-performance culture, when you came in 2 years ago? You looked at it and you said, I want to preserve it and grow it. I want to, calibrate 2 degrees to the left or 2 degrees to the right, or I need to be, what were your goals when you came in as CEO and chairman, and how did you think about the Gilead culture at the time?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think it's a combination of both of what you said, Rich. I mean, first of all, preserving the high science, preserving this intrinsic contract and with society, with the community. So those I only want to strengthen. At the same time, I often describe Gilead as when I came in as kind of a teenager in an adult body. And what I mean by that is, it had an extraordinary success in a short period of time. I mean, just to put financial numbers on it, I mean, it went from a 10 billion market cap company to a 100 billion market cap company in around 18 months with some of the extraordinary advances that they made. So you can imagine with a company that suddenly was in this kind of larger body, myself coming from an experience of a larger company, but wanting to preserve this kind of biotech entrepreneurial spirit, I've been very careful at kind of layering on process. But I think from a leadership perspective, I think of it in a couple different ways in terms of our journey. One is, staying purpose-driven. And I'm a big believer. I saw it last year like I've never seen it before at Gilead. When you think about the team at Gilead being able to, and they were working around the clock, right? And with all the other challenges they had at home trying to deal with the pandemic, to bring remdesivir in less than 1 year to the first FDA-approved medicine that's helping patients get out of the hospital 5 to 7 days earlier. Can you imagine this most recent surge, for instance, in the United States in December without remdesivir, in terms of the hospital capacity? 1 out of every 2 patients now are getting remdesivir in the hospital. But that is not all that we did last year. Last year, we also built this oncology portfolio. I often say we walked and chewed gum at the same time. And we were able to build what I think is a world-leading cancer medicine portfolio also over the past year that is now becoming available to patients this year. And so that wouldn't have happened without this purpose-driven. In other words, putting the patient at the center of everything we do is number one. And then the second piece of the leadership component, which has to go hand in hand, because obviously purpose-driven enough, is making sure we delegate and empower others. Now, as a small company that grew so quickly, Gilead, was not totally accustomed to empowering down into the organization. There was a lot of decision making at the top. So one of the things that I've done and my team have done are really being very disciplined about what decisions we make and what we don't make. And it's more important what we don't make, and pushing those decisions to the level of competency in the organization where they're going to be better decisions, the decisions we made better, plus they'll be made faster. And I can tell you there's no way we could have gone last year with remdesivir and making sure we kept our commitment to HIV patients and hepatitis patients and done all this with cancer if we didn't push this decision-making down to very talented colleagues that are doing that. And I guess the third thing that comes to mind that I'm bringing to Gilead with the team is, and it particularly was true last year, is compassion. I think given the level of stress that our colleagues were under last year, I mean, we leaned into everything we could do for our employee base. We have half of our employees that have to be on campus to produce our medicines or be in the research labs to make what we did possible. And they made a lot of sacrifices. And so we had to make sure they had everything they needed at home to make themselves, capable of doing this. And so I think I'm happy to say that we led with our human resource policies and just in general with our communication around compassion. I think all three of those are not only fundamental for the last year, but frankly, fundamental for Gilead's next chapter.
Well, I want to come back to your work on oncology and when we talk about the future of Gilead at the end of this interview. But did you find, because of COVID, that you had to make some changes to your own leadership style and that of the people who report directly to you? That simply due to the fact that we were all working under the COVID anvil and many people were working virtually, and how do you, the being able to convey purpose when your only medium is a screen because you're not able to walk around and buoy people up or offer helpful criticism. How did you adjust to that personally? And how did you convey those kind of changes to the people who report to you?
That's a great question. Look, I think, and particularly for this audience, technology saved us last year. I mean, the ability to have kept everything moving, to keep all the balls in the air and juggling. I mean, if we didn't have technology to allow us to work in our team-based environment, which we needed to, in such an effective and efficient way, there's no way we could have done what we did for patients last year. But to your point around adapting leadership style, yeah, there's lots of things. I'm an extroverted leader. When I'm on campus, which I miss and can't wait to get back to, I go and I just have lunch with whoever's sitting at the table. And that serves two purposes. Probably most importantly, I get to understand what's going on in the organization at a level that you don't if you sit in your office as a CEO. And secondly, I get to express some of my opinions to folks, and it's a great dialogue and exchange. So, in the absence of being able to do that live, we tried to do that virtually. I mean, we've done a lot of different sessions where we bring different groups of employees together to share their insights, et cetera. So I think that's number one. Number two is, back to how I had to pivot my leadership style last year. Look, we were all, and as a globe, we were all overwhelmed in terms of what we had to do. And certainly we were with remdesivir. And so I needed to do, because the world had its focus on Gilead, right? And we had a lot of outside people I would never normally speak to were calling me on the phone and asking questions. And so I had to play a more active role at remdesivir at that time than I normally would with a drug in our development. And so I leaned into that. I delegated more of the other things that I did. And I worked collaboratively with a very talented team within Gilead to work the external interface, the internal interface, and to make sure they had rapid decision-making, right? Because decisions had to be made within hours, not days, to make that work. And the board was amazingly supportive, and my leadership team. So I saw myself pivoting my leadership style. And of course, now I've been able to pivot back a little bit because, of where we stand. But I think we all had to do that in different ways. I mean, we all had to adjust our leadership style. I'm a big believer in situational leadership, and I think you have to be responsive to your environment. And when it's a new task and a brand new task, and believe me, the pandemic was a new task for everybody, I think more senior people needed to be immediately there to support and help the team. And then as the teams became more comfortable and the world settled down, we could pull back a bit.
I want to talk, speaking of pivots, I want to pivot to a different topic here and talk about the role of digital technology, not just in organizing Gilead and allowing people to work from home and collaborating better, but about the sort of longer term impact. I mean, there's been this wonderful synergy between the life sciences industry and the information technology industries, the latter having progressed at the rate of Moore's law for about 50 or 55 years. But suddenly, over the last 3 or 4 years, it appears that we're in a phase change, best described by Diane Green, who at the time I interviewed her was CEO of Google Cloud. but was one of the co-founders of VMware back in the 90s. And she said, as a result of cloud computing, artificial intelligence, ubiquitous edge or mobile computing, higher bandwidth, et cetera, that we were entering this phase of the economy where we had a global supercomputing grid. She described it as running at an evolutionary pace 2 to 3 times faster than Moore's law, which to me sounds less evolutionary and more like a phase change. And so as you look into the 2020s and all the accomplishments that Gilead has made, how do you at Gilead and your strategists and your CIO and CTO look into this world where digital technology will be delivering predictive analytics and artificial intelligence at a faster, more robust rate, which is nothing but good news, I think, for pharma and life sciences, but only if they align themselves to those accelerating powers?
Yeah, that's look, there's no doubt, whether it's evolutionary or phase change, I'm not an expert on that, but what I will say is there's no doubt that data and analytics are transforming the way that we discover and develop and get medicines to patients. Now, in my previous role when I was with Roche, I did a lot of work with the tech industry. One of the companies I worked closely with was a company called Flatiron Health, which took real world data in cancer and really curated that to a level where it almost became as good and as predictive as clinical trial data. Now, you can imagine how powerful that would be in our setting and how powerful it is for us today. And we're using those types of data sources to enable all aspects of our business, right? From development, allowing us to create clinical trials that are more fit for purpose and that can be recruited faster, to regulatory, our ability to potentially, in some cases, do studies where it's very difficult to recruit patients in some aspects of cancer, where we can, instead of doing a double-arm study, we can do a single-arm study and compare it to a really robust, good data source from a real-world data standpoint. And we've seen the regulatory authorities be open to that. So I'm a big believer that, tech is fundamental to what we do on a daily basis. I think it is transforming what we do in every aspect of our business today. I'm not a believer, by the way, that it's going to discover new medicines on its own. Biology is still a very challenging, field. And I think our scientists can be enabled with data, but I think the hypothesis generation and where we need to go is still going to be essential as we move forward. But enabling all aspects of our business, it is today and will only become more important in the future.
Well, about the future, let's talk about the future of healthcare. And this will be my last question or set of questions. And maybe put it in the context of oncology. I mean, let us hope, thanks to you and thanks to Moderna and Pfizer and all the people that are working so hard and tirelessly to mitigate the COVID epidemic, that it'll soon be behind us, not only in the United States, but the world, and including India. But cancer is still with us. And all of us have lost loved ones to cancer. What is the future of healthcare? But then maybe specifically tie it around oncology and the work that Gilead is doing there.
Yeah, look, I think there are two major themes that, as we think about the future of healthcare, will come together. One is the deeper understanding of science, and I would argue particularly in the field of immunology, and I'll get back to that in a second. And the other one is this ability to tap into really high quality data sources and use advanced analytic on those to allow and enable us to bring more cures to patients. On the first one, I mean, back to your cancer point, we all know now that the incredible advances that have been made over the past 5 to 10 years by harnessing the body's own immune system to fight cancer, right? And I do believe that that's the future of cancer care, both alone and in combination with other medicines. to get these long, durable responses in patients where you really are retraining the body's immune system to fight cancer. I mean, cancer is really just a cell that's been discombobulated in your body and no longer understands how to regulate it. And if the immune system can now get back to re-regulating that cancer, you can get into cures, if you like, which is really where we're going for at Gilead, with things like cell therapy, our kite cell therapy business, and other medicines within our portfolio. We're looking not just to delay the period of time that people's disease gets worse, but really get into these curative states. Now, the data piece of it, as I said before, is going to be instrumental to helping us make bets. When you work in an industry where 95% of everything you put into clinical trials fails, you have to have, first of all, a pretty strong stomach. Secondly, you have to have a little humility. And thirdly, if you can be enabled with data sources that allow you to get that failure rate from 95% even to 93% or 90% because of data sources that allow you to make better hypotheses or that's a huge difference for patients. That will result in a massive productivity gain for the industry over the years to come. So I couldn't be more pleased to be speaking at this event and the power that everybody at TiEcon, I think, brings to the future of healthcare. I think there's tremendous opportunities for life sciences companies and health tech and health tech companies and tech companies in general to come together to solve the biggest challenges in our time for patients, including cancer.
Well, Dan, thank you very much. And on behalf of TiEcon, this is a most illuminating and inspirational 25 minutes. And best wishes to all your efforts in India and in the future.
Thank you, Rich.